Hey everyone, welcome to the Kentico podcast. This is episode number 34 of the podcast about all things Kentico Kontent, Kentico Experience, .NET, and Azure. Once again, this is your host, Brian McKeever, and I'm excited today because I'm joined by a special guest, Adam Amran. Adam, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Brian.
Great. I'm excited because we're going to talk about something that is super interesting if you're new to the world of content and maybe new to the world of developing websites with tools that make it very fast and easy. So we're going to cover a little bit about Adam's experience with GatsbyJS to make his project that he has completed recently. And I guess before we get too far into it, Adam, could you maybe introduce yourself and say what you do at Kentico? Also, give us something that you're passionate about doing outside of work.
Sure. So I'm a UX designer. I work at Kentico, currently on Kentico Kontent. And I've been doing this for like 8 years now. I used to be a web designer before. Then I worked in agencies for a long time. And finally, last year, I started working at Kentico. And yeah, design in general is my big passion. And outside of that, I like making these small side projects from time to time. So when I worked in a mobile development agency, I developed my own mobile app. And right now I felt that it would be a great time to do some side project that involves kind of what I work on day to day.
Very cool, very cool, man. It sounds like you have quite the experience and history. That's awesome. I don't usually meet too many people who are in the design space, but then also like development, who've been in an agency, who haven't, who've been at now a product company. I'm kind of jealous actually because it sounds like you get to do lots of cool, fun things.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty diverse over the course of the years. Yeah.
Good. Well, that's not too uncommon, I guess. I get to do a lot of development things. Now I'm in a little bit more of strategy, kind of like you mentioned, and solutioning and architecture of overall projects, but and even once in a while, they still let me code. That's as the joke goes here around at BizStream. But so today, for the people listening, what I want to cover is kind of what you mentioned. You mentioned some things you like to do around passionate, like side projects. And I've heard that you have a kind of an interesting project that you wanted to do. Could you maybe speak a little bit about what that project was and why you're passionate about it?
Yeah, so the project is called Untools, and it's basically a collection of thinking tools and frameworks that I sort of collected over time. Some of them I use in my work, and some of them I just collected, from various sources around this. And the idea with this project is to kind of put all of these tools into one place and to help people, solve problems, make decisions, understand systems, which are sort of the basic categories of all these tools. And my aim with this was also to learn a bit of development too.
Okay.
Because I've been learning JavaScript for the past several months or half a year or so. So kind of wanted to brush up on my development skills because before I used to do design, I used to do a bit of coding. Not too much, not like professionally, but as a hobby, basically. It was one of the first things that I learned around the tech space, some HTML and CSS.
Nice.
So I kind of wanted to do that. And at the same time, it looked like a great opportunity to really work with the product that I'm working on, kind of dog fooding there, and really use it as an end user. So it kind of, all of these things kind of came together in this project.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome that, you kind of had a passion about starting with a little bit of HTML, CSS, JavaScript. That is, I think, where it starts for a lot of us, right? I mean, it's where it started for me too. And, I think that there's really cool ways to use technology today to brush up on those. I mean, it's funny, there's so many different ways to do JavaScript. Vanilla, Angular, React, Vue, all the other frameworks. Some people like frameworks, some people don't, but it's there's plenty of opportunity out there to feed the passion. So if you're listening to this, I definitely ask or recommend, if you're developers at home, make sure you're doing a side project, because that's something that will take your mind off the day to day and hopefully keep your skills sharp. So I'm glad to hear it. That's very cool. That's why I tell a lot of people I work with as well. So
Definitely, yeah.
I'm curious, did you use untools on Kentico Kontent at all in your day-to-day work? Like you kind of mentioned that it was part of it, but could you go into a little bit about how you used one of the tools here in the day-to-day stuff that you do?
Yeah, so for example, I remember using the first principles thinking on a project that I recently worked on, where I used that thinking tool to kind of break down the problem into these fundamental principles, and from there, I can sort of build the solution up from these principles. And so this is one example. Um, yeah,
Okay.
I might use, for example, issue trees, but I haven't used them yet. Um, and there are a couple of other tools like the systems thinking tools that I yet to use, and I would love to get into as soon as I have an opportunity for that.
Yeah, it's always about having the right amount of time, right? That's the hard part of,
Yeah,
using all those fun things.
yeah.
Okay. So the concepts are there, and obviously you have some design skills to make the design of a project like this. But maybe could you walk through how did you end up building the site that they're showing now? If you're just listening, I'm looking at untools.co. That's the project that Adam has been talking about. You can go see it right now if you're listening at home. But maybe could you get a little bit into now you have this project, you have this idea, maybe you have some designs. What was the next thing you did? Knowing that you wanted to use some JavaScript, how did you decide maybe what tools and how that all went from the very beginning?
So it was kind of an organic process with some dead ends, and I actually started with the content itself. I started gathering it in Notion. That's the tool I use for gathering various notes, for organizing it.
Okay.
So I had some content, and I kind of knew what kind of a structure I wanted to use. So the next thing that I did was actually to jump into Kentico Kontent and create a project there and do some simple content model that I could use. And once I had that, I was looking at a technical solution that I could use. And initially, that's interesting, I didn't want to use GatsbyJS. It wasn't my first choice. My first choice was actually Webflow as a no-code tool.
Okay.
Because that one allows for working with a headless CMS as well. So I was coming from having the project in Kentico Kontent, and I was looking at this option of the technical solution, and I tried starting building this in Webflow, but I quickly realized that it would be quite time consuming for me because it was a tool that I had to use from the start, very, very start, and I didn't know a lot. Even though it's a no-code tool, it's pretty complex. At least it seemed to me like that. So that was sort of a dead end with that, and I started looking for some other solutions, and I stumbled upon Gatsby, and it seemed great for this type of small site, and the value proposition of having a blazing fast site seemed great. So at the same time, as I said, I had been learning some JavaScript as well. So it seemed like a great synergy of learning something new, but utilizing what I already know too. So it seemed like a good choice. And I knew that, you are showing the source plugin for Kentico Kontent, right. And I knew that we had that, and I thought this would be actually a great way of building this. So I gave it a go, and it proved a little bit easier than I initially thought. I had been learning just the vanilla JavaScript, so I haven't had any previous experience with React whatsoever. So this was my first ever React project, and I was kind of learning things on the go.
Sure.
I haven't really tried learning some React basics before diving into this. And looking back, maybe I should have. Would have
Yeah, welcome to the
made
world of
me more
components.
productive.
Yeah. There's so much
Yeah,
going on with React.
yeah. But yeah, it wasn't something that would prevent me from doing this. So in the end, I ended up with Gatsby, and I'm glad that I did because I learned a lot, and the site is really fast. And a lot of people who gave me some feedback on this project told me how fast the site is and how amazing it's for them.
Yeah, so it's interesting you bring up Webflow because I have some experience with that tool as well. We use that to prototype some designs because it does a great job of making it easy to distribute design assets and get feedback. I think it does a great job at that. And we had a similar experience. We were starting to look at, can we make it a little bit more dynamic and make some, you know, changes to what clients were asking us feedback wise. Hey, can you move this around? When you click here, can this pop up or this move? And we were starting to realize that Webflow has some potential to do that. But I think what we learned was, well, yeah, you could do that in one part of Webflow, but to have like it expand out to multiple different views or URLs of Webflow, you were doing the same work like over and over and over. And anytime that
Yeah.
you've got that feeling of, wait, I'm doing the same work over and over and over to make the same thing happen multiple times the same way, that's like a, oh my gosh, red flag in my head, right? So
Hmm.
we came to the same thing. It's like, it's great for the one job that it really means to do well, but we didn't love it as a longer term solution to put any kind of, dynamic content into it.
Hmm.
And that's awesome. Like you said, the content first approach is an approach that we definitely recommend to people in this scenario who have a new project they're trying to figure out what to do. Think about the content model, organize your content into that model, and then worry about the technology that implements the website or the mobile native app that it could use, because that's the cool thing about a headless CMS like content. You can use it in different channels. So um, it's funny that you also mentioned that was your first experience with React, because that was
Yeah.
the similar experience I had about a year and a half ago when I started out with a project that I did on content and Gatsby. And it's very interesting being a .NET developer who has a lot of C# experience and a little bit of JavaScript experience to go to that React world. And that's why I made the joke about the components a minute ago, because there's components upon components in React is basically my general feel of it. But I
Yeah.
did like it, and like you, I thought it was very easy to get started. I think GatsbyJS does a good job of documentation, and I think that the starter examples make it quick to spin up a project, understand how it works,
Yeah.
understand that you need a source to get your data from, and that's where the Kentico Kontent source plugin comes into play that we're looking at here on the screen. I think that this integration is bar none one of the best integrations that the content product has, and they've put a lot of time into. I think they're on like version 2 or 3 of it at this point from when it first started, and it does an amazing job of just kind of doing all that work for you to source the nodes of your React site, really. And
Yeah.
can you tell me a little bit about, like, did you even know that, like, did you have to worry too much about like the GraphQL aspect of things, or did it just kind of work when you spun up the starter template with what I'm guessing you start out at the content starter template that has the Gatsby plugin already installed? Is that where you started?
I actually started with I think with the Gatsby starter theme,
Hmm.
and
Okay.
so I had to do some work to integrate the plugin into that.
Okay.
But I was also surprised that it was fairly easy. Um, I had no previous
Mm-hmm.
experience with GraphQL either, so I kind of had to learn somewhat how to work with that. But it was fairly easy for me. I had some challenges with getting it to work, to really get the data from content that I needed. But once I kind of wrapped my head around how it works, it was fairly easy, I would say. Yeah.
Okay. Good. Now, so you mentioned getting the data out of contents. Was there anything that you had to change content model wise or create new content types to support the GatsbyJS side of things, or was it flexible enough that it kind of just worked once you knew how to do the right queries?
Let me see. Once I started working with it and sourcing the data, I think I began seeing a couple of things that I had to change. It's just small things. I didn't really have to reinvent the whole content model. Maybe there were just a couple of things that I had to change. And looking forward, there will be some things that I will have to change. So, for example, when it comes to sorting the tools on the website, I am right now sorting them by the last modified date,
Okay.
which sort of comes with it, but it's not something that I would manage manually. So
Sure.
what I would do, looking back, I would probably change the content model to feature some date element so that I could control the order of these tools as they are displayed. But overall, yeah, I didn't have to do a lot of changes, but I stumbled upon a few once I started working with the data. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Any stumbling blocks that you had with maybe the framework of Gatsby, or like did you use the CLI tool that comes with it a little bit? I think that's what most people generally do. Or was picking up the Gatsby
Yes.
side pretty easy?
I found it fairly easy. They had really good documentation around it. I did use the CLI just to start the development server so that I could see the changes that I worked on. Not really a lot beyond that. But yeah, I think the starter theme made things a lot easier for me because I would see how things are implemented and I didn't have to figure it out from the scratch.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, I think, that if you're not sure and you want to try out a technology like Gatsby, which is really a static site generator that will create static site HTML from a source, whether it's different headless CMSs or markdown files, the thing that impresses me is you don't need a lot of extra tooling to make it happen. It's basically you're working in your file system and everything comes down as NPM packages that you need, like you just mentioned, the development web server or the deployment tools for how to deploy the finished project to your hosting environment. That's either just a plugin that comes with Gatsby, or it's just part of like the framework that they have to make lightning fast sites. And I guess we could talk about that a little bit too. Like, where did you choose to end up hosting your Untools site at? Is it on Netlify, or did you choose a different aspect for pushing the final build out to a server?
Yeah, it's actually Netlify. I chose it because it seemed like the easiest option, where anytime I push into my GitHub repo, it gets updated and deployed again. So it seemed like the most straightforward option for me, and it comes with some hosting as well. So it was my first choice there, yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, I think that, if you're not sure how to get started with GatsbyJS, we've covered a couple things. There's the starter template that you can get right from GatsbyJS.org. There's a couple open source projects in the Kentico Kontent GitHub repos for getting started templates as well that have the plugin already there. But that's really the key thing. As long as you have the source plugin, you're off and running, and it should be working well to connect up. And one thing to know, obviously, you're going to have to change the configuration of your project ID. I don't know, Adam, did you happen to use the preview API at all from Kontent when you were building this, or are you tying all just to the main, fully published content with the delivery API?
So before I launched, I was actually previewing things by pushing them to the repo and seeing the live version on it, but I haven't published that yet at that time. But once I have launched the project, I worked with one of our development relations guys at Kentico to set up a preview, and I had been using the Gatsby preview for that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm totally curious. So Gatsby Preview is basically Gatsby's version of giving you a head on top of the headless CMS. How's that working for you? Do you like the preview tool that Gatsby offers?
Yeah, I think it works great. I mean, I had to get some help with setting it up because it wasn't completely straightforward. But once we got set it up, it works great, and it gives me the option to see the changes before I publish them because often I have to tweak a lot of things before I'm happy with how they look. So I think it works great for me. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Yeah, I would encourage developers out there who are listening, or if you're a business or marketing person who's listening, the thing that we hear the most is it's something that seeing the preview of the content in a web view is what makes this easier to wrap your head around from if you're working on just your content in Kentico Kontent. It's very easy to set up and do, and it allows you to see making changes quickly. What does that look like before going out to the world? So it's a little bit of like the experience of using a tool like Kentico Experience, which is a full blown web CMS plus digital experience platform. Like you get all of it in that one large package, which comes with a hefty licensing fee sometimes. But you can do that with a tool like Content and GatsbyJS at not really adding any kind of cost other than maybe some small things. But I think having preview is crucial to being successful on a project like, well, almost any web project out there, honestly. So
Yeah, definitely.
all right, so maybe the last tough question for you, Adam. If you had to do one thing different, or maybe one thing that you would have that you know now today that you didn't know at the beginning of this process, whether it was specific to Content or Gatsby or React or whatever, what's something that oh man, I now know this, and I would have done this at the beginning?
Interesting question. So one thing I would do differently is probably learn some React fundamentals before working with this. That would have saved me a lot of frustration and would have made me much more productive. So that's one thing. But other than that, I'm not really sure.
Okay.
I think it definitely helped that I had some JavaScript fundamentals at least. That definitely helped. Without that, I would have been really lost, I think.
yeah, that's true. When you go with a JavaScript based client side technology to build your static site, knowing some client side technology helps.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's good. So if you're out there and you're listening and you're not sure about GatsbyJS, there you go. Check out React a little bit, get some familiarity with it, maybe understand the routing in React. I know that's one thing that threw me a little bit was getting a hold of like the routing in my head. But once you get past some of these small things, it just kind of comes and it flows easy. And so there you go. So without a ton of experience in development, without a ton of experience in this specific React technology, you can see it's still possible to create a beautiful looking site with content with GatsbyJS that's lightning fast. Untools.co is where you can go to check out the project that Adam's been talking about. And I don't know, Adam, you got any future plans for Untools.co that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I'm currently in the process of adding some new tools. Since I've launched, I added just one, so there are some new tools overdue. And at the same time, I'm working on some guides that would help people choose between the different tools. So like when's the right time to use which tool.
Okay.
And I'm still kind of figuring out how exactly to implement that on the website, and maybe content can play some part in that, but I have to yet figure it out.
Okay. Well, great. Well, there you have it. If anybody has any questions for you, Adam, what's the best way they can get a hold of you? Do you have like a Twitter handle or an email that you want to share for people if they want to know more about you or about Content or Untools?
Yeah, I think people can reach out to me on Twitter. I have a handle AmranCZ, that's AMRANCZ, and people can message me there, and I'm happy to talk about this.
Okay, great. And I'll make sure I get that link in the show notes underneath the podcast recording on my blog and at YouTube. So, well, I want to thank you today, Adam. I appreciate your time. I don't want to take too much of your time because I know for you, I believe it's like a Friday afternoon, and I'm sure there's more interesting things to do out there on a Friday afternoon than talk to me. So I'm going to let you go. Once again, thanks for your time. And everyone at home, you've been listening to episode number 34 of the Kentico Rocks podcast. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian, for having me. It was great talking to you about this.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll talk to you later.